So gain is kind of step one. Like I said, you kind of get in this selected channel view, you're kind of getting honestly a fairly brief overview of all these little areas, but you'll find that on most all of them, if you tap on them twice, first we'll get a purple ring around a knob, magenta ring, whatever you want to call that. See this knob right here, it says touch and turn. Any knob that I currently have selected and is outlined in that magenta knob, I can control using this knob. So if I tap on my analog gain there, I can use this knob to control my analog gain. Now obviously I have a fixed gain control up here, but this gives me the ability to get to some things where I don't have a direct knob on the surface. So like if I want to adjust something in one of these mixes, I can tap there, I can use that knob to do it. But you'll find on most things, if I tap it once, it'll enable my selection for that on touch and turn, and if I tap it again, I get a pop-up. And so this is always kind of a way to go to more granular detail. And a lot of times if I change stuff here, I'll see little lights and things change on the surface that let me know what that change was, so I can still see that I did it, but I can't actually manipulate those things without going into that pop-up view to make more changes. So right here is a button that says plus 48 volts. This is what we call 48 volts, or phantom power is the most common term for that. There are certain types of microphones, condenser microphones are the most common example, that require phantom power to work. It's literally just a little bit of voltage sent back down the cable to the microphone, turns the microphone on, allows it to function so you can get audio back from it. So most microphones in the world are dynamic, they don't require that. Condensers will. There's also some devices that will require that are not microphones, like some direct boxes that you're using for like a guitar or a bass or whatever will be an active DI and require phantom power to turn that on. So there's also, you probably won't use them a whole lot, you may never use one. There's also microphones called ribbon microphones that if you send phantom power to, it'll destroy it. So it's one of those things you just want to be a little bit careful doing this, because if you don't know what you're turning it on for, you could potentially break something. So just be cautious with that. Ask a question, make sure you know what the source is on the other end. And most ribbon mics even have a circuit in them that protects them from that. Unless the wiring's wrong, you could send phantom power to it and it's going to be just fine. But just so you know, that's there. So that's there. GC is gain compensation. If you have multiple of these consoles on a network sharing audio, that can be useful, but you don't, so don't worry about it. This button right here says input port. So one of the things that it's powerful but can be confusing on digital consoles is that we don't have to use, so this console on the back has 32 physical inputs, 32 preamps. But you saw that it's a 64 channel console. So where do the other 32 channels come from? There's also a digital networking port on the back of this console called Dante, where I can connect devices that'll feed audio digitally into the console. So I could put devices on a network or a computer that I can get audio into the computer via Dante. All kinds of things I can do with that to get audio into the console without having to use traditional analog mic cables. What's great about that is it opens the door to be able to get content from lots of different places over long distances and all kinds of cool stuff. But one of the things that can be confusing is that channel 30 on the console does not have to come from input 30 on the back of the console. I can do what we call a soft patch and change which physical input feeds this channel. So if I tap in here, I can choose a totally different input on the console to bring my audio in, and I would lose this microphone. I can unpatch it entirely, and now this microphone's not gonna do anything. So I say that mostly to say, I think at least the way when I built the file for this console, everything was built one-to-one, and I imagine it still is, because there's not a lot. And when I say one-to-one, I mean that every input is physically going to be using the physical input on the back that corresponds to the channel number, and it looks like they all are. So hopefully that's something that makes your life easy, is that it's that way. But it's also, again, just good to know, because if you ever had a channel that's not working, can't figure it out, maybe somebody hit a soft patch on it by accident or on purpose for some other reason, and now you've got no signal on that channel. But it does give you the ability to move where you have something plugged in, but still put it back on the channel where you want it. So know that that's there, but most of the time you want to leave that on the same input number as the channel you're using, so that you're able to troubleshoot things much easier. Right here, it's just showing the name and icon for that. Don't worry about that one again. That's analog gain, digital gain link, where I can touch that. This one up here I do want to talk about right here. This little button that looks like a circle with a slash through it. You said you're an electrical engineer?
I went to electrical. No, I
no worries.
out.
No worries. But that's like a mathematical symbol.
No.
It's a polarity is what this one is. And so polarity is used to this one gets really technical, but there's some really good actual times when you may use this. So I want to at least explain it because it's a little over the head, but if you grasp it, I'm gonna explain the full technical side of it, and then I'm gonna tell you the easy version of how to actually use it. What that does is it flips the positive and negative signal of the microphone that's coming into the console. When I push that button, it'll flip the polarity of that signal upside down. So audio travels in waves, right? So literally I'm turning that wave on its head is the end result of what I'm doing. Now the reasons when you want to do this is, the best example is anytime you have two microphones really close together picking up the same source. Or whether that's on purpose or not, when you have two microphones close together, you run the risk of what we call getting some phase cancellation. That's where when I have, audio travels in waves. So one of the prime examples, if you had an acoustic drum set, you don't have to worry about this in here, but like this is just a good learning point. This is the most common case to use it. So if I have an acoustic drum set, the snare frequently gets mic'd with a mic on top and a mic on the bottom. When the audio emanates out from that drum, what I typically get, just in the nature of being kind of mirror image with two microphones, in the microphone on top, let's say the wave is in the top of that kind of peak of that wave. But what I'm gonna get on the bottom mic is the opposite of that. I'm gonna get that same signal, but it's gonna be in like the bottom of the valley of that wave. So now when I mix those two signals together, so I've mixed a positive and a negative. If I add +1 and -1 together, what do I get? 0. So I get cancellation. That's exactly how it works. So like I'm gonna get actual cancellation where I'm gonna not hear the signal, at least not correctly, due to cancellation.
So is that the feedback we hear when you have two? Because I know sometimes when we have two mics together, we would hear like a...
Two mics together should never cause feedback, because feedback is just to do with audio making its way from the speakers back into those microphones. So a lot of times if you just have the microphone too loud, or with the EQ that's not, sometimes you're gonna have certain frequencies just that naturally want to feedback that you need to make sure you clean up out of a channel. But polarity doesn't have anything to do with feedback. The feedback is truly just a loop that the audio is so loud that's making its way back from the speakers back into the microphone, causing a loop where now I'm getting noises that are feeding back into that microphone, back to the sound system, and it progressively gets louder and louder.
Can you get power feedback though?
What's that?
From like having too much power behind the stage or underneath the stage?
No, you wouldn't get feedback. You can get interference.
Or interference?
You could potentially get electrical interference, but you shouldn't have to deal with that. But it's totally feasible. So polarity is just going to let me flip basically the wiring of that microphone backwards. So when I take that bottom snare mic and that top snare mic, instead of having one that's in the positive state and one that's in the negative state, I have two positives. So instead of cancellation, I get summation. I get addition, which is good. Now you'll notice that you're going to hear that kind of cancellation way more in the low frequencies than in the high frequencies because they're longer and they're easier to. You know what? Is that drawer still unlocked? Mm-hmm. Would you give me a second microphone? When in doubt, just pay 1, 2. Okay, cool. I've got two microphones, right? So this is a microphone, and this is a microphone. Okay, right there, two mics, right? Nice and loud. Now I'm gonna take one of those two, and I'm gonna flip the polarity. And all I've done, see how I can still hear? I get really close to this microphone and I can hear myself, but if I get in the middle, I'm totally canceled because I have flipped these two microphones opposite of each other. Now you can still hear a little bit of high frequency that doesn't get canceled. Those frequencies are so physically small that it's really hard it's hard to get perfect cancellation between them because they're so small. The longer waves of the low frequency, they're so large that they're very easily canceled. As I move these away from each other, I'm going to get different amounts of frequencies that get picked up, that get canceled, that don't get canceled. So that's polarity, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So
where did you do that on the screen? Where is it?
right here. Okay. So again, if I tap into my pop-up for my gain control, polarity switch is right there.
Okay.
So I say all that simply for the sake, I'm going to give you this one back. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. I say all that, you're probably going to leave the polarity normal on 99.99% of things all the time. Now, cases when you'll actually use that, or when you should at least check it, like I said, anytime you have multiple microphones in a physically small space and like going to be picking up the same signals, I like to at least flip the polarity on one versus the other and check it. like if I have an acoustic piano and I have 2 microphones inside that piano, I'm gonna just try the polarity both ways and see which one sounds better. Because like I said, it's low frequency, so it's more bass heavy frequencies that I'm gonna hear that change in. So again, if I'm hearing a piano and I flip the polarity, do I get more bass or less bass when I flip the polarity? If I get more, then I should leave it flipped and I should let that. Whichever one gives me more signal, that's usually where I wanna be. If I've got an acoustic that I'm micing with 2 mics, or like anytime you have, again, an acoustic drum set's a great example because you have a lot of microphones in the same space.
Yeah.
So it's nice to just try them and see, does it sound better here or here? So it's not something super crazy. There's times, like I said, if I have a snare top and a snare bottom, I'm just gonna by default flip one of them, but I should at least check that and see at some point, does it actually need it? Because I've actually ran into weird situations where it didn't need it. I don't know if someone was wired backwards and so the signal was already flipped, but there's times when I haven't needed it. So it's always good to at least check it, okay?